To the Break Room Classic Film fans, it's tea time for a coffee break.
Can you get Cab Calloway on it?
That's my patty waist sugar.
I'm shocked the
Gambling is going on in here.
By the way, how is your father?
But I want to know, does it bother you?
Hi guys and dolls, that girl's here again. Since our last cinema coffee chat, I've been away from the coffee house a couple of weeks as I've been busy with a few projects, including preparation for my live tweet event for TCM Star of the Month Spotlight on Dorothy Dandridge for Island in the Sun, 1957, airing on TCM this Sunday, the 27th at 7 p.m. Central Time. This will be a TCM premiere of the film and is a film I was overly excited to be asked to live tweet for, as it is an early film memory for me. Growing up knowing Dorothy Dandridge, drawn to her as both a performer and her personal story, as a young Black girl in love with cinema in general and a special connection, a special love for classic cinema, you naturally seek yourself out in representation. You want to see the best version of yourself, your true self on screen, in stories. And that goes across the color lines. Everyone wants to relate to a story or a character. When we see film, that's what makes us connect. Cinema. But to see someone who looks like you doing what you long to do, what you aspire to do, entertain, create, transcend, takes a whole new meaning and a whole different meaning, I think, for people of color, particularly Black men and women, boys and girls. And I have to say, I was brought up in a household taught by both my parents that being Black and female wasn't a limitation. So it never occurred to me, it never crossed my mind that I couldn't do what anyone else can do. The point they drove home to me is don't do what everyone else is doing. Do what you do, only better, your way. I was taught to be individual. Do what no one else can do but you. Your stamp, your mark, your print. Everyone has one. Do you. Dorothy Dandridge represented that for me, which is what I found to be a special connection to those like Dandridge, Diane Carroll, Hazel Scott, Josephine Baker, Lena Horne, showcasing we can be attractive, desired, feminine, independent, contributing by a population, unlimited. In short, Dorothy Dandridge is special to me. I was able to highlight that a few years ago in a theatrical production. I was invited by a college to do Spotlighting Black Women of the Arts, 1920s through the 50s, choreographing and personally performing Dorothy Dandridge's version of I've Got Rhythm. So I'm excited to be a part of her Star of the Month spotlight in this live tweeting sort of a way. Hope to see you there. Last time we met, we kicked off our print to screen miniseries with two Audrey Hepburn films adapted from stories, Sabrina Fair and Venus Rising, turned Sabrina and How to Steal a Million. We're continuing this week with Ernest Hemingway's 1929 novel, A Farewell to Arms. I've shared this book with you guys a few times. It was gifted to me by my dad a year ago and just hadn't gotten around to reading it. You know how that goes. The more books you read, the longer your to-read list gets. So finally decided to make this a part of my summer reads this summer. The read went pretty smooth and quick, no spoilers. However, being familiar with the story itself through various adaptations, including my fave of the adaptations, the 1932 Frank Borzage film starring Gary Cooper and Helen Hayes, shout out to Jack LaRue, I reached a point where I knew I was becoming too involved with the story and had to brace myself for what was coming. So I put it down for a few days, went to something else more lighthearted and carefree, Audrey Hepburn reads, and came back to it. Because I find in my experience, when we read a story, it becomes personal, especially a good story, like a good read. It becomes your life temporarily. And minus the word hitch, which disconnected me from the story for a while and threw me for a minute because it was so left field before I remembered who I was reading, what I was reading, like, oh, okay. So I finally continued on. It was always in the back of my mind until the very last word of the very last page. And in spite of that, I liked it. Of course, we get way more than we do with the 1932 adaptation, though we get our share for what the code would allow, involving a rejection by James Wingate that didn't hold up, as Paramount had already complied on their end, including a double ending, resulting with a green light decision by the AMPP jury ruled in favor of the film's release. Quote, because of the greatness of the picture and the excellence of the direction and treatment, A Farewell to Arms was not in violation of the code. In the novel, we get more of Frederick's life in the war, on the field, in the front lines, in the hospital, a lot of playtime with him and Catherine, And I felt more connected with them in print than on screen. And that's saying something, seeing how much I love the chemistry between Gary Cooper and Helen Hayes, here borrowed from MGM to work on the Paramount picture. But again, when it becomes your world seen through your eyes, when you read, it becomes in-depth, personal. And I couldn't help seeing from the very beginning, Matisse Schoenaerts. I've seen so many videos of him about it. How does he pronounce his name? But I saw him as Frederick, not just because he's terribly attractive, but I found Frederick solid on the exterior, what meets the eye, but a vulnerability on the interior, what only the reader sees, and in story told, only a side someone you fall in love with sees, whether you tell them outright in time or not, but they see it, sense it because of the intimate connection you have with them, if that makes sense. Something I think only Matisse could play, as we see him in films like Far From the Madding Crowd. Rinaldi, I liked better in print than on screen. And his role, or rather his involvement in the storyline, specifically speaking between Frederick and Catherine, is different in the novel than it is in the 1932 adapt. And in print, reading it through my eyes, I saw Marcello Mastroianni as Rinaldi. Your read, your rules, right? Catherine, she's Catherine. I think for me, she comes off better on screen with Helen Hayes in character than in print. In print, in my mind, you have to work with her. You have to get what's going on here because she can come off a little, well, okay, as Frederick says in the book, I thought you were a little crazy in the beginning, but if you peel back the exterior, you'll find with her as well, she's playing a game of sorts. In the beginning, more so of pretending and make-believe amidst the reality of what's going on with the war. Her need for him, Frederick, to tell her he loves her and to reassure her that they're the only ones in the world, when he's like, yeah, okay, sure. But with him and her too, it's a defining moment when he does fall in love with Catherine. And as I read, I felt the sincerity behind this revelation that carried me through the rest of the read. He was madly in love with her to the point she and nothing else was his world. She was the end all be all, his beginning, his end, without giving anything away, his very existence, actually. Of course, as I've always done for as long as I can remember, I read reviews after I read a book I've enjoyed or a film to see what others thought of it, and it seems A Farewell to Arms is a bit mixed. I found a fair share of those who didn't like Frederick and or Catherine in the book, finding them disconnected to one another or insincere. That didn't happen for me. Again, I think it was my world through my eyes when reading it that created my own interpretation of how I viewed the characters. Bottom line, enjoyed the read, glad I read it, and absolutely recommend it. Fashion Friday. This week we take a trip to Broadway. Keeping with the 1929 theme, I'm showcasing The Dames, my costumes for the 1930s inspired theatrical production I wrote, performed, and designed these pieces for, that were an influence between 1929's Broadway Melody and Chicago. These are 2 costumes of 5 I created, each having their own variation of cut as to make them slightly different from one another. And when you hear Dames, you may instantly think Dick Powell and 1934, or I Only Have Eyes for You, which we had to break gently to my dad that one of his faves since his youth, the Flamingos, didn't create that song. They helped make it popular and is the version I grew up with first and the one I am partial to. So as the same way we had to do with Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, sung by Irene Dunn and Roberta in 1935, previously written and sung in the 1933 Broadway musical. Again, one of my dad's faves since his youth, as well as mine, all thanks to my dad, made popular in 1958 by The Platters, reaching #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 music chart. And though the composer Jerome Kern's widow did not like the version the Platters released, going as far as contemplating preventing the distribution of the adaptation with legal action, it's my personal favorite recording of the song. I am a huge fan of musicals, the Backstage musicals being amongst my favorite. I think because the backstage aspect of it are relatable and it's fun to watch unfold in anticipation of the theatrical showcase we usually get in the end. In 1929's all talking, all singing, all dancing Broadway melody starring Anita Page, Bessie Love, and Charles King becomes MGM's first talkie, later giving birth to Broadway Melody of 1936, 38, 1940, and its own Broadway Melody remake, Two Girls on Broadway, 1940, starring Joan Blondell, Lana Turner, and George Murphy, who I always think gets lost in the shuffle of conversation. Not including its various parodies, does become 1929's top grossing picture, if not becoming sort of like the grandmother or grandfather of backstage musicals. Not to be confused with MGM's second feature film musical without a plot, all-star musical extravaganza, The Hollywood Revue of 1929, starring amongst others like Anita Page and Bessie Love, but also Marion Davies, Buster Keaton, Norma Shearer, John Gilbert, Laurel and Hardy, Marie Dressler, Lionel Barrymore, Joan Crawford, William Haynes, Cliff Edwards, hosted by Jack Benny and Conrad Nigel. So for the past couple of weeks, I've asked and polled on my Twitter and Instagram account for you to share your favorite backstage musicals with me, and received some really wonderful faves. At Hello Andrew gave a reply of any with Busby Berkeley involved and a new to him film, a fave of mine, the 1943 film written by Gypsy Rose Lee from her 1941 pulp mystery novel, The G-String Murders. Yep. Lady of Burlesque, starring Babs, Barbara Stanwyck. A mention of interest came from at Malin 1811, asking if the stage production of The Drowsy Chaperone counted as a backstage musical. I thought it an interesting choice, and though the room does transform into a Broadway setting as part of the storyline with how the story is told, I don't know if I'd classify it as a backstage musical, at least for me. What do you guys think? Anyone? Nonetheless, I thought I'd throw it in. All right, from at me in Montgomery, 42nd Street, The Bandwagon, Summer Stock, and asking if Please Don't Eat the Daisies with Doris Day and David Niven counted. Yeah, I'll let that count. I never even really thought of it as a backstage musical, but if you stretch it, it will fit, right? Forever Faithful and True at Kaftan Woman gave Footlight Serenade in 1942 with John Payne, Betty Grable, and Victor Couture as a fave, with her blog piece written, which I will have linked below. I not only love that one, but I was glad someone brought a 20th Century Fox film into the conversation, which Victor Couture's daughter, who is very active on social media and spreads loads of fun facts and trivia and commentary on her dad, also shared under the poll I gave of favorite backstage musicals, a clip of the outtake between her dad, Victor Couture, and Betty Grable from Footlight Serenade, which I had seen a while back and almost forgot about it. So we'll also include that in the links below for those who have not seen it. At KK Kitties, K-K-A-Y, Kitties, okay, gave the Gold Digger movies as their faves. And when it came to the actual poll between 42nd Street, 1933, The Bandwagon, 1953, Footlight Parade, 1933, and A Chorus Line, 1985, 42nd Street won by a slight margin with 34.4% of the vote. The Bandwagon coming in second with 30.3%. Footlight Parade at 21.2%. And A Chorus Line at 12.1%. So there you are. My personal backstage musical is a toss-up between 42nd Street, Gold Diggers of 1933, and Footlight Parade. However, if all my DVDs were taken away from me in this group and I could only keep one, Footlight Parade, James Cagney in Shanghai Lil never gets old. Honey? Yes, I am aware. That is from Blonde Crazy. And before anyone does, I'm going to leave it here for this edition of Cinema Coffee Fashion Friday. Next time we meet, we'll discuss another print-to-screen film. This one, not a summer read, but a book I had bought maybe in 2010 and never picked up to read until a few years ago. In spite of the film being a long-standing classic film family fave growing up, and I won't spoil what the read is, but I'll give one of those, in a few words, describe your favorite film in the most boring way type descriptions. A group travels by boat, returns home, and puts on a show. Until next time, be safe, be well, stay healthy, stay smart, and I'll see you next time. À bientôt.
Can you get Cab Calloway on it?
Des assiettes sans des assiettes.
Catch my panty waist
Des
sugar.
hommes
I'm
sans
shocked
des
to
hommes.
find that gambling is going on in here.
By the way, how is your father?
But I want to know, does it bother you?